Oh,
Look
because
like
you
it?
were just no, you were just doing the check, the double.
I was seeing what the placement is in on the screen there.
Gotcha. So, boys, episode 5 of the High
What up?
Mark podcast.
What up?
What up?
So, Alex, I got a question for you because we've been texting about this.
Mm-hmm.
Did you actually read those 2 articles and not just the headlines?
No, I just looked at the headlines.
I knew it.
For sure.
So in those
It's nonsense.
articles,
I mean,
they're not
I wouldn't agree.
debating what you are saying.
Right.
The
Sure.
articles are what they're debating is it reasonable to say have all this climate hysteria of it's the end of the world, it's the end all be all, not that humans are making it or increasing CO2, not that the earth isn't warming at a greater rate, but that it's not the end all be all. That's their argument.
For sure. Yeah. And does that seem like a useful use of the time when we've already decided where it's coming from and what the problem is? I'd argue
Yeah,
probably
they're not
not.
disputing that. They're not disputing that.
For sure. I like the idea of we've already decided like the problem, so we should debate like how to all the solutions, the cool, interesting solutions, and ways of fixing it and things like that. Even debating whether it exists or not or anything is a waste of time. I think the Greta's and stuff don't help anything. I think she posted a few years ago that the scientists said that the world was gonna end in a few years, and then deleted the tweet just recently because it actually matched up. Like she said 3 years or something, and then it literally hit to 3 years later. Yeah, that's super not helpful whatsoever.
Yeah, I believe Al Gore did that too, to some degree, right? To some.
Yeah,
some
and I
extent.
mean, I don't. I've never understood that from any concept. Otherwise,
Right.
really, because for example, like the dinosaurs, the temperatures on the planet were much hotter. There was more CO2 in the air, and there was still both an atmosphere and both life on the planet. So there's really no reason why you would say that the planet's going to end. I think where they should approach it from is just like the guys on All In was saying about the possibilities of how much strategic ability we would gain in the United States from moving away from oil and coal, as well as also, the effects that will come from temperature increases won't destroy the Earth or ruin it or anything, but there's huge, like for example, huge swaths of the human population is along coasts. So it was actually lots of the arable farmland that we all currently depend on to eat. Those are what's going to change. When they speaking of change, those are the current things that are going to change. And so in that sense, they're going to change, and that's massively disruptive. And we we can't defend the southern border, so the idea that like interior states would be able to keep out people from the coast if that happened is a pipe dream. So I think to prevent the type of chaos that would result from it, it's more a human problems that's caused, not necessarily like the earth dying or any of that. That's definitely it was far worse conditions in the past in terms of CO2 and temperatures and atmospheric pressure in the past, and the earth still had life and all that kind of stuff. So that won't change it. But human disruption, where all the humans are and where they currently are and where they're making food, those will be changed, and that's going to get disrupted. And I think they should sell it more like that. Tweets that say it's literally going to be the end of the world in 3 years, when we know how much crazier it was in dinosaur times, is pretty extreme and pretty crazy and nonsensical for sure.
Yeah, see, that's where I agree too. It's like I totally agree that it is a thing, and it's definitely like a detriment to humanity. But I think people and entities, like everything, will take advantage of it and use the hysteria and use the fear to their own advantage.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, like say I wanted to sell a book that said the world's going to end in 3 years. and it would be a great top seller kind of thing if I sold it with a package that the reason why is climate change, even though that's
Mhm.
false and my claims are false and everything. I just wanted to sell a book and make a lot of money. I think
Mhm.
there is definitely some of that for sure in those climate change activists and stuff. They're doing it for specific political or economic, their personal economic, financial reasons. They're doing it, not
Yeah.
even for the hope of making the situation better.
Or if you're the government and you wanted to tax carbon output, which is what they're actually doing in Australia. They actually have carbon credits right now. And
Seen that. Yeah.
yeah, in Australia, they actually
Yeah,
have that right now. And it's only going to be coming to the US where they're just going to tax your output, and which is why they're trying to make 15-minute cities to, I mean, in my mind, to just control the populace by saying you can't move within a 15-minute parameter of where you live. But
it's
again, I
interesting.
haven't
Yeah,
looked into any of this enough to really have a solid opinion, which is why I'm always more asking questions.
for sure. Yeah, I think the carbon is an issue that we can continue to move away from, but realistically, we can't just drop it today or tomorrow. The energy demands are. But I think also there's been a really first position of oil companies and stuff pushing against any change, so it slowed the rate of change, and we can go much faster. So we can go much faster than we are. Also, of course, the 1% that we talked about in one of the other podcasts on the energy infrastructure, those kind of things could definitely speed things along significantly. But for sure, like perhaps a carbon tax would be a way to incentivize speeding up the process. But that's the wrong way to go about it, I believe. The other way, it should be the other way around. Spend more on energy infrastructure for new energy production instead, and come up
Mhm.
with bonds that you can put to the citizens of each state if they want to fund them, or other methods. Then try to tax it on the other end, on the outputs end, and then try to tax it that way. That's probably they're trying to approach it that way to try to speed up the process, because essentially if you want to avoid the tax, right, you avoid carbon, right? So a de facto. So, but again, I disagree with that method. They could definitely go another approach with it. But with that said, they could definitely speed it up more than they have, for sure.
Yeah, and another thing in the article is they were referring to the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and
Mhm.
how their whole plan is to have net zero carbon output. But
Yeah,
when
exactly.
if we went to a net zero carbon output, like what do you do with all the poor people around the world who rely on all these carbon, all these fuels that and energy sources that are just constantly releasing carbon because they're the cheapest and most affordable, and people in
Right.
third world countries don't want to starve and or die.
Mhm.
For sure, yeah. It should be on the same cycle that the West got wealthy and powerful. Is they start with cheap sources of carbon and then move on to
Mm-hmm.
others. The problem is we're not moving on to it at this rate we should, and then therefore, what incentive do they have to do that either? So I think the natural method would be to definitely do that. When you're at your first stage of industrialization, there's no real other method than to use cheap sources of energy. So you simply have to use that in your favor. But we're not there yet. We're not there anymore. So the reason why we're still using so much of our energy is less makes sense. But for them, absolutely, and they should be given that leeway to still put carbon into the atmosphere because they didn't have a chance to industrialize and get rich potentially yet.
Yeah, because I mean, I think if I remember right, since um, Obama's administration, maybe even a little bit of Bush's administration, the United States carbon output has been on a decline every single year, even through Trump, um, on a decline.
For sure.
But you got countries like China that are exceeding all the ground that we are cutting and declining on. They're actually exceeding. So it's still, we're taking that one step forward, and they're just bringing us those handful of steps backwards.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
And
like without China's help, there's no way to meet any reductions of carbon. I think it's also interesting to point out too, though, in terms of a total output. I want to get this right, but I believe it was in 20 years, the China used as much steel and concrete as the United States did in 100. So to give you an idea of how much their demand
That's
is.
insane.
So also that just shows you their level of both their population relative to ours and their demands, as well as what it's going to take for them to get off of carbon. With that said, it was amazing once they had those coal plants near Beijing. And once you started to see Beijing have the acid rain, and I don't know if you guys seen the pictures, but they were sure amazingly quick to move away from that once they had the incentive to do so. So I think there
Right.
is a problem of that as well. Easy money is cheap money, and so on and so forth. So those kind of things can incentivize you not to change behaviors as well.
Well, it's like, why aren't we moving on to more powerful sources of energy like nuclear? If that's not the
Nuclear,
case,
I'm totally for
you know,
nuclear. Yeah, absolutely. It's yeah.
it
Exactly.
seems like they're just going to be reliant on, wind power and solar power, which will be good and good supplements for the main power. But I don't think it'll ever work as the main source of
Yeah,
energy.
China, back in 2021, they announced that they plan to build 150 new nuclear power plants by 2035,
Right.
which would essentially bring their cost of energy per kilowatt, make it cheaper than ours in the United States.
So how does that work, like compared to their population, right? Because they have a much bigger population, probably
Which is
bigger energy
why,
load, right?
yes,
Which
so
is
which is why their
crazier.
plan is about 150 new ones by
Yeah.
2035. And by 2035, I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but they'd be paying about 4 cents. They'd be the cheapest developed, far cheaper than us, of what our average would be by that same time with the current energy policy that we have in place,
Yeah, I wonder
which
what the
isn't
energy
good.
demands.
And
for
that is a good point to bring up the bureaucracy of the United States and the government slowing down more nuclear plants. We need more of
Mhm.
that, and that's one where they neither help fund it and they stand in the way with unnecessary regulation. There's been actually pretty amazing technological advancements in some fields like nuclear salts, for example, where they have different
Mhm.
ways of storing it than they used to, basically, the waste. And um, you know, it they're still making it as difficult as if it was a Chernobyl type situation when the plants are constructed significantly differently now.
Yeah, see, and that's where like my skepticism comes in when it's like, why aren't they going in that direction? If they really want to be like, sufficient but also green and get rid of the carbon at the same time. And that's, where my conspiracy theory starts popping up. I'm like, what the heck is going on, behind the
For
scenes?
sure, yeah.
But
Yeah,
it's probably
yeah.
just more, like, Occam's razor. It's probably just like, human greed combined with unfortunate events kind of all at the same time.
The United States policy is more divided than most on energy policy, obviously, and summed up in things like what Vivek said during the debate. Viswami said during the debate. Stuff like that. Or what I'm
So
talking about.
I don't know exactly specifically what you're talking about, but I watched a video of him today talking about, and he was actually in favor of, of nuclear power plants and stuff like that. If that's what you're referring to, I'm not too sure.
Yeah, just that the climate change is a hoax and stuff, but I think it's pretty clear that it's not necessarily a hoax. It's just that for some reason it's been politicized, and things like that are so bizarre when they become politicized because it's like the science is really clear. There's no reason to. Plus, we can all make money from other sources, so there's really no need for this. And you kind of get the sense that it was politicized for certain people to continue to make money and reap enormous profits that they have for 100 years. And because really it doesn't make a lot of sense. There's plenty of great new opportunities to make money elsewhere in other energy production, as well as the time wasted and the money wasted in campaigning, whether it exists or not, is many countries are already moving on to how to fix it and what to do about it and how to make money from it, for that matter. Like China,
Yeah,
for example, like China.
Yeah, like why aren't we funding more into fission and having or fusion or whichever one, would produce the more efficient, infrastructure. But I don't know. I guess that's just see that's where just my skepticism comes in, because it's like, why? I know they are still doing that, and there is people investing, and they've had breakthroughs in that area, but it's interesting why it's like humans are just
Nuclear is like a great stopgap where,
yeah.
say, we need more time to get solar and those kind of things, technology like the absorption rate of solar panels.
Mm-hmm.
We need to get their efficiency rating up and stuff like that. That's going to take time and research. Like, say, the chip, computer chips. The whole thing took off in the 70s, but here we are now. It took this long to really get really powerful. And
Right.
the chips the panels might require that to get really high efficiency, and then you can get a lot of power with a little bit of area. But in that meantime, while that's happening, we could get lots of nuclear production going, and that would then phase those out when we have some more efficient other methods. So there's lots of solutions for sure. The real question is, why are we even waiting and spending time debating whether it exists or not, and then why aren't we getting on it? Because we can make the most money from it, as always, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, and in 2019, the Trump administration, for the first time in 60 years, was a net exporter of energy, the United States.
Right.
First time in 60 years, we're a net exporter.
It's impressive.
And then the Biden administration came in with a different approach. So we are no longer, you could almost say, energy independent. Not that it's, we should have, with that independence, we should be continuing to move forward and looking at alternatives that would work. But like I've said on here before, we should be using coal, oil, natural gas, everything in the process of getting us to complete nuclear, solar.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you throw wind in there, but geothermal, until we can get those really dialed in and as efficient as possible. But it goes into your thing of, are people having their hands out where you're a little conspiracy theorist of, why are we not doing these things? Like, is money going into a series of politicians' pockets, and big oil is just too powerful in the United States? Is our government too big to where they just do what they want? What's up with all these oil deals in Ukraine, and why are we funding their war? And politicians' nieces and children are heads of these companies in Ukraine and making money off of these oil companies in Ukraine. Like, it all fucking smells to me.
For sure. I was always alarmed, and the viewers can correct me if I'm wrong, but I had read an article where far more than like the gun charge and anything that Biden's son was recently arrested, what alarmed me is that he was, a few years back, I can look up the details, but he was put on the board of a Ukrainian gas company.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, he doesn't have experience in that, and he didn't have 20 years. So if you're put on the executive board of a gas plant, you have to make very smart strategic decisions, and it's very, very weird, very, very unusual and weird, and doesn't make sense unless he had been an exec at other companies for 20 years and had earned that experience and was a well knowledgeable person to make smart exec. That was more alarming than anything that everyone's been arguing about in terms of Biden's son ever since. But that seemed to be the least of the worries of both sides in terms of his behavior. That behavior was more alarming in terms of what he did to get that than just
Right.
about anything.
Right. Yeah, the whole thing is pretty fishy, but it's who knows really what someone. Yeah.
Yeah, that gas company is called Burisma Holdings.
Burisma, yeah.
Yep, and he is on the board. But I saw an article, and I'm trying to look it up. I probably won't find it, but there was a total of 4 United States politicians who either their children or a nephew were on boards of Ukrainian gas and oil company boards. So not just the Bidens.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Really, those should be the questions that everyone's
them.
asking. That should be the stuff people are taking to the streets and protesting about.
It was like 3 Democrats, 1 Republican. Their family members were on these boards. And it's like, that's interesting. Bet you they've never fucking been to Ukraine.
They don't know the local geology
No,
history of
one thing
Ukraine,
about
or I can make a guess that none of them have experience on executive boards of gas companies. And for them to be appointed, and they happen to be family members of politicians, it isn't that
and it,
hard, or even a conspiracy to say that they might have been put there because of political connections, which is completely
yeah,
wrong. It should be illegal if it isn't, and is morally
both
totally wrong.
sides though, obviously, so it's hard to even point out one individual. It's the whole thing seems just working together against it, the whole system.
What
So
what Hunter Biden did on the board of the Ukrainian energy company. Yeah, so I mean, you have to wonder. It just doesn't make sense, And again, if he had that was his career and he had been doing it his whole life, it'd be far less suspicious. I'd be okay, politicians' sons can have lives too. But if you have no experience essentially, and you're put on the board of a very high level part in the company, that's just alarm bells should be ringing. It's not a conspiracy. That is a conspiracy.
Yeah. Well, that's public information, and people, what's interesting is that people accepted that, and it's we all knew that. You said a long time ago, we knew it. Yeah, so
the extent to where people just accepted it, and if all the protest, it'd be like politicians' family members getting put on boards they don't deserve to be. And of course, they make 11 million or whatever further pay at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
That's even incidental. It's just that that's corrupt use of political office.
So would you guys consider the Wall Street Journal a credible news source?
Yeah, I mean,
fair.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so the Wall Street Journal is the one that reported that John Kerry, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, and Mitt Romney all had family members on boards of various companies. It's actually John Kerry's stepson, Romney's son, and Nancy Pelosi's son, Paul Jr. They were all executives on different Ukrainian-based gas companies.
Right.
But if you look at factcheck.com, like any of the fact checks, they say no. But even about Hunter Biden. So, I mean.
Well, the article I had was from Reuters, and I like those APs and Reuters because they often don't even offer a position. They're just literally reporting stuff that's been reported down, old school news stuff where they just
how journalism should be.
And they'll let other people put opinion pieces out about it, in general.
Crazy. Yeah.
They're just going to write what's been, reported and stored.
Yeah.
So at least it's a starting point. But it is weird that it would be categorically denied and then affirmed by the Wall Street Journal. And boy, if that's not a reflection of how confusing it is to try to get accurate information in our time and age, wow, that's something.
So much noise and so much conflicting information, and it's so saturated. It's so.
What did the article that you found say?
Just that. Let's see here. It's just Reuters when it came out in 2019. He was during his time on board of Ukraine's largest natural gas companies. It's just a Reuters article talking about a report that was put out in regards to it. So it's he was on the Ukrainian energy company Burisma. Does that match up to Wall Street's journal?
Yeah.
So to be clear, he was a non-executive director. But these are those, to me, to be fair, those are those kind of, you can word something in corporate speak so that nothing is anything. So he was a director on a board, but since it was labeled as non-executive, I guess it's somehow different.
It's like the producers on a movie, that old joke, or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, and they just showed up and maybe had a drink with one of the actors at the end, and now they're producer or something.
Yeah. Something like that.
But the opposite of that, why would he even be anywhere near a director position at this Ukrainian gas? I think is the more important thing. Why is he even near that? And the reason why that's important, I think, what the bigger picture of what we're talking about is why are we having so much trouble making headway on energy production in the United States and things that nature is people have incentives from many different directions to not change things,
Right.
whether it's oil companies or otherwise, or like in this case, government positions and favors that they get from oil companies.
I'll be right back. You guys keep it going.
Sure.
This is crazy. I just I asked ChatGPT about the Hunter Biden, and it says in 2014, this is ChatGPT saying this, that Hunter Biden joined the board of directors of Burisma. He served on the board until 2019. So I don't know. This is obviously ChatGPT saying this. So this is take it with a grain.
ChatGPT said that he did, and then fact check said he didn't, and then like a Reuters article when it first came out in 2019 said he did, and Wall Street Journal. So it's like super hard to tell. Obviously,
who do you trust?
Politicians are going to work really hard to try to cover that. One thing that always alarmed me too was years ago was Madeleine Albright. She was Clinton's Secretary of Defense, I think. She started a hedge fund when she left office, and many of their clients were from all around the world. And it's another example to me of using political connections you built while in office and then using them to leverage things in your favor. Now, of course, I don't know the details on the trades that were made on the hedge fund, but you have to wonder, with a little insider trading, from information from these connections that she's got abroad while she was Secretary of Defense or what have you, that she would be able to leverage those for amazing gains, whether that's fair or not, because insider trading is illegal currently, as far as I understand.
As far as I understand, but it's
clearly openly, it's like a rule that's there, but no one obeys it at this point.
It's quite evidently that there is people abusing it, not to accuse anybody of anything, but I'm just saying.
And for me, with other people I was debating with, it's like, don't even worry about what side of the party she was on. Why does a former Secretary of Defense need to start a hedge fund? Just doesn't make sense. Like, it's just very weird, especially when you're catering to foreign clients. It does seem to be a conflict of interest on many levels because you use connections that you built and made promises to people overseas in return for financial favors later. You can't help but wonder, maybe not. Maybe they all played by the book. But wouldn't it be better if you really wanted to play by the book, not start a hedge fund that's caters to foreign clients?
See, that would be fine if these weren't the people writing the rules of the book. That's my issue, is that these are the people creating the rules that are, we're adhering to. So it's 100%. Like they can,
that is the conflict of interest right there, that they're making the rules, the ones who make the rules. And that's why things like, to me, seems reasonable is senators, at least while they're in office, just do exchange traded funds, index funds, but individual companies, and the amounts that they're able to invest, like there's no limit on how much they can invest, and they can also invest in individual companies. You can't see how it wouldn't turn into a conflict of interest where they would favor these companies in return for great returns. And it sure seems to happen. They all go into office and they come out millionaires.
Yeah. And we don't say anything or do anything about it. We just, bitch about it on Twitter, and then nothing happens. And then,
for sure.
Whatever.
Yeah, I'll send you the guy's link. He's really great, and he's on Twitter. And one of his main things is to literally post trades that senators are doing, because after a while they have to post legally what their trades were in the last 6 months.
Transparent, yeah.
And it's really there's enough that are lining up, and both parties are guilty of it. There's members of both parties that are boards of agricultural, and they favor some company in agricultural, and they happen to invest in them. These are conflicts of interest by any measure.
Crazy.
By any measure. They are.
Weird.
So I got in a little update for you guys. I don't know if you saw the video I sent you from Josh Hawley. He's a Republican senator from Missouri. In July of this year, he proposed a bill called the Ban Stock Trading for Government Officials Act.
Right.
It was voted down. And a lot of the opponents said it would violate their First Amendment right.
Gotcha. And I
How
would
Yeah.
say,
so?
at least while you're in office, I'll be fair and say, like, when you're out of office, then, okay. And also, to be fair, you can still do stock trading, just not on individual companies. So I buy index funds. We all do. It's just a thing. You can buy a whole index, like the S&P 500. You can buy an
Mhm.
entire index. That'd be fine. I'd be totally fine if politicians did that and bought their index. They still make, a good solid return. But the amazing returns that they're doing by investing in individual companies is better than Buffett. It's something else. I'll tell you what. They're
They're
turning
like 90 years old and they're like getting better trades than all these
they're
people.
getting better trades than
Something it's like,
people
yeah,
who do it as professionals. So
yeah. I don't
you
know.
can't help but think. But yeah, like you're saying, man, they totally voted it down. It's very similar to you've never heard either party say, "I'm not going to give myself a raise" when they propose raising the pay of the Senate. They
Wow.
seem to always work
Right.
together so good in that moment. They're fighting on the floor and they call each other names out in the media. But man, when they have to take a vote whether to raise their insurance for themselves or their pay, they just come together. The team comes together.
Harmony. Just magic harmony
There's
all of a
magical
sudden.
harmony all of a sudden, and I'm sure you would see a similar thing on the vote against individual stock company trades, and which would really short circuit a lot of this. And it's this very simple, reasonable thing, especially if you just limit it to their terms. And it would also
Yeah,
incentivize a lot of them who did want to go and do something to get out of office instead of be
dude,
career
that's yes.
lifetime. Yeah,
That's the whole thing is we need to de-incentivize the like career politicians where people go in there for like
yeah,
extensive money. You should
right.
get paid for your time and you should get paid for your work and everything. I totally agree with that, but it's like people think that it's like some kind of like rock star, you know, ticket to rock
For sure.
stardom,
It
you
does
know.
kind of seem like that, and
It does,
I
yeah.
can't see why you wouldn't want your other fellow Americans to try a hand at governing. You know, you had your 16 years or whatever, so why don't you, Dianne Feinstein and what have you? You've been there. You're like 90. Like, wouldn't it be unreasonable to let somebody else give it a shot? Hopefully you've been doing well for your uh, your
Mhm.
voters in your district, but I think part of the
Yeah.
American thing would be to give other Americans a chance to govern.
Yeah,
And boy,
that's
they sure seem to box it out and then become career politicians, don't they? Real easy. Part of that
yeah,
is
I
the
like
voters, though. I've always
probably
been disturbed
simplify
by that too.
yeah. No, I probably simplified too much, but I like the idea of like the George Washington politician where it's like,
Right.
you do your job, you rule, and then you go back to your farm and you live your life kind of thing. Where it's like, where now it's like you just stay in there and you keep making the money until the end of time.
For sure. So they seem to do it when they can't even really govern at 90 and are
Yeah,
freezing
dude.
up and
Yeah. Oh
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
You guys see that the second
yeah.
time McCarthy frees up or
Mitch McConnell.
McConnell? Yeah, sorry,
Yeah. Dude,
McConnell. Yeah.
him, Biden, Feinstein, like those, they need to just, someone just like guide them
Well,
out. Be like, hey, you need to
yeah.
go off to like a place, no sharp corners.
And you
So
can't
we
help
get.
but wonder the strong incentive for them to stay in office when you're seeing a fact of so many other industries will move you off into retirement by this age,
Mhm.
and they're still clinging on. Like, why?
Yeah,
Why in
because they're
any
getting
way are you doing
generational
this?
wealth. They're getting incredible wealth from just, I mean, I guess I don't really know like the intricate like details of what they do day to day, but it's like I can't imagine it's harder than like what Elon engineers do or what
Oh,
any
for
of
sure.
those
Yeah, it's
guys
definitely
do.
not anything they're doing, and it is it's a good amount of work and a good amount of paperwork and a lot of stuff to keep up on. But all the more reason when you're 90
Dude,
to
yes. It's
to
like
let
that
your other fellow
alone.
Americans.
You can't do your job, obviously, if you can't even, I don't know.
But the
Maybe
fact
I'm
that
just
they're
being
so
too
adamant
critical, but
about staying in term way beyond what most industries would consider retirement age is shouldn't that be kind of yet another warning sign that there's some financial, we'll just say it might be some other incentive, but I can
Mhm.
assume it's a strong financial incentive to stay in office
Can only assume, yeah.
against the best the best wishes of the American people, and probably they're looking out for them. it's not looking out for them, is what I mean.
So here's
yeah.
one for you. The salary of the Congress members is $174,000 a year. Not bad.
That's pretty good.
The average net worth is $1.3 million.
And I think they often, I think one thing I can't remember, maybe look if you can, is their insurance and medical care packages and stuff are top notch. Like they are so much
they have
better.
their own.
Yeah.
They have their own completely separate from Medicare, Medicaid, and it is lush. And what's so infuriating about that is when they try to vote down benefits on the other programs. So you want to cut those, but you won't take any. You're not a patriot in the sense that you won't take any for your own. You're going to make sure you get premium benefits, though, and you still talk about looking out for your district or your fellow Americans. These are the kind of absolute fakeries that they're just completely doing all the time, nonstop.
Yeah, I hate to be hyperbolic, but it sounds similar to what I would imagine Roman,
senators.
Senators.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. It's exactly. That's what's so amazing is the rhyming of the history is they'd accumulate so much wealth and power, and they just would get on a mantle and talk about for the Republic and everything, and here we are. Same thing. They're just talking about, they're going on about the Republic, but ruining it.
Yeah.
So who's another one? The average net worth of the members of Senate is 1.76 million, and senior members are 2.5.
Must be good at saving. They're really
Man,
good
they're
at
so good at saving.
They have zero expenses.
Yes, zero expenses.
Zero expenses, and yeah, like I said, all these packages that would any other costs that they would have are somehow funded by the government and by the state. And there's been a few of these I've seen over the years since I started following in the late 90s, and they always all come together for a vote to raise the pay. Like suddenly both parties are united in.
So what do you guys think
harmony.
about? I hear this all the time. Like we need term limits. I hear that all the time. It's like
it's totally reasonable.
What is the downside to that? What?
So I'll go. There's a part of me that likes the idea of implementing term limits. There's a part of me that doesn't, because it's like, how often are we going to try and fix the problem with Band-Aids?
When you just keep putting someone in new,
all we're doing is accumulating all these rules, all these laws, all these regulations, all these social programs that we're going to use to try and help, instead of actually just figuring out what the cancer is. And when me and Alex yesterday were talking about just a government being more efficient, more streamlined, it is just, they're so powerful, the entire government. We got an oligarch, them, and big businesses and the banks. They're just all in arms with one each other, going in stride with one another. They're yoked, whatever term you want to use. If we can just get our federal government to do only what the purpose from our founding fathers was for them to do, and if they can just focus on those things, it wouldn't allow for someone like Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden, and even Republican guys who've lived their whole lives from their 20s to be 80 in politics and never have any challengers. Like, there's something wrong when someone doesn't have a challenger for that long.
Absolutely, yeah.
The results. If you've been in office that long, by any stretch of logic, by any basic application logic, they would be outperforming. They would be getting so much results to stay in office for that long, but none of them are. Not a single one of them have put the kind of results that we're asking for every day as the average American. And so the fact that they're still in office, you just are like, why? For so many reasons. Why are you still in office? You were not a high performer. You did not get the results. That's that kind of thing of the private market, like Elon's engineers. If they aren't doing amazing things, they're not going to be there for the entire life of their whole career.
They don't stay there very long.
That simply is not how it works, and yet it is somehow. It suspends gravity in government, and they make no results yet stay in office for their entire career.
The sad part is we allow it. It's like we become so complacent. Yeah, we've become so complacent, so satiated with our
Yeah.
McDonald's and iPhones and stuff. It's like we
There
don't
is a
care.
part of this too with the voter, and that they need to be much more aggressive in terms of voting out their incumbents, as well as I was alarmed even when Bush Jr. was getting elected. I was like, why would you ever vote for the son of another president? If we're all truly democracy,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the king tones that ring when we vote another major oligarch family into office, the son of one, it was just, you know, very disturbing to me. Like, that's the last thing of George Washington type of ideals that Americans should, on paper, adhere to. Yet
Mm-hmm.
it had the Bush name, and so many were willing to just use that. Or I don't know what their justification was, but nonetheless, he won by the amounts he did. So for some reason, people thought it would
I
be
wonder what that
acceptable
is.
in America to
Yeah.
vote the son of another president into office, which to me is, to me, this is the qualification if you want to be the family member of Kennedy or Bush or any dynastic family, is your results, whatever your thing was before, again, are just stellar. Like, if you are a true high
Mm-hmm.
performer and incredible, then give him a shot. But I believe he was known as a rather middling governor of Texas before he, not anything special, definitely not a game changer for the state or anything of that nature. Just kind of coasted along and that kind of thing, and really almost got elected by that and the presidency on his name alone. We should be, as Americans, very against that. And the fact that when I brought it up back then, people were like, yeah, whatever, yeah, no big deal. Like, those are the kind of fundamentals that do add up and matter. You're voting in the son of a president.
Exactly.
Why not a king? You know, why not?
That's
You
what
just
it
have
is. It's those little fundamentals that add up over time that it's equal to what we're dealing with nowadays. It's
exactly.
exactly
And
right.
I'm totally not against like them altogether, but they need to be demonstrating like he would have been the best governor of Texas in the entire history of Texas to be voted into presidency. But he wasn't, from all accounts.
Right. Right.
So, good old Joe Biden, he actually just hit his 50th anniversary this year in United States politics from the year he got elected to Senate in 1973.
I don't even care what party you're for or whatever. That's
Same.
insanity, dude. That's
Yeah,
total insanity.
Nancy Pelosi is 36 years in U.S. politics. And then we have a active member named that I've never heard of, Patrick Leah, who's been there in the Senate since 1975. Chuck Grassley, Republican.
Older
He's
than
been in
us.
there since
Older than our whole lives.
1981.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say the same thing.
Than
Yeah.
our entire lives, yeah. Then they've been in office, and I just got a great Economics Explained video, and it's talking about the exodus of companies and people from California. And isn't the second one? Isn't she the governor, or isn't she the senator of California? Pelosi.
Pelosi.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking about if she would have got results in California, is it the best it's ever been? And
Right.
it's
Yes,
like a titan
exactly.
right now, but it is not. California has major issues it's running into, and she's still in office. That's not how we're supposed to. That's not how this democracy thing's supposed to work. Somehow it got definitely. It's not fully
And that's
broken, but it's
Yeah,
that's
not
what
functioning. It's not functioning correctly.
I was asking. You go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say Maxine Waters, also from California, has been in there for 44 years.
44 years
years.
Yeah.
on a state that's having more and more structural and economic trouble.
Yeah.
Just think about like the logic if you were like a person and you're saying, should this person be in office anymore? By any measure,
Yeah.
she should not. She should not.
Yeah. So if we step back and like look at it from like a semi first principles perspective and break it down into the smallest pieces, like, so you'd have to assume that from us voting, it has to stem, all this like toxicity and all this like corruption has to stem from us voting us. But it's like, how do we get better candidates in there, and how do we incentivize people to actually want to get in there and like do that George Washington style of
I think, yeah, there's a couple ones. One would be like limiting money in politics. I think we tried it. They gave it a good shot. They We've tried both. I think we need to limit severely the amount so that the playing
Mhm.
field is lowered for candidates. Because essentially now they have to be de facto ordained by big money to have enough money to run. They simply cannot campaign against someone who has unlimited funds that they've received
Mhm.
from, for example, the article I sent you guys on two of the largest lobbyists in Washington, which are healthcare companies. If they ordain you with unlimited funds to run for their thing,
Mm.
because there's no limits on those amounts, then they essentially it makes it extremely hard to win against them. And we say that they have a chance, but de facto, most of the time, the election results show that they don't. Some new up and comer who doesn't have the funds, but he's making big waves. They just simply don't have the weight to throw around. So we need to level the playing field somewhat, which other countries have already moved towards doing. And I agree with you. That's the problem with the rules there. But essentially, how do we get these people to do it without the rules? And the other way would be that these people would openly say that I'm not going to accept this money. But yeah,
It's tough. Yeah, that's a
that's
tough conundrum. And it's
without
funny,
a rule decreeing it by law,
right?
they
Which
would have
would,
to. The only other alternative was that saying I'm not going to take money from United Group. Yeah,
Mhm.
right. Which one
And
has?
on the other side of that, if you did make a law and restrict the incentive too much, you wouldn't. I don't think you'd have as much people, wanting to be a politician or something. Maybe
For
because
sure.
it's like the the um the idea that wealth is synonymous with power and
Politicians.
like
Yeah.
politicians and stuff is like so engraved. So it's, I don't know. It's
But maybe that's what we need is literally the George Washington approach was I don't like the burden of ruling. And so we need people actually, even like I was saying with Jesse, like all the people that the FBI needs is people who don't want to be politicized in the system.
I
The
know,
people that
right?
are joining are, but we need
Yeah.
ones that aren't. We need people who will be the counterweight. And I think it's the same thing, politician. If you starve it enough, only the people who actually want to serve the people are going to be the ones that are left on average.
Hmm.
All things equal. There'll be some that'll try to have some other angle that they're trying to do it. But let's say if I go into it and I have no chance to make money, I just want to improve Nevada because I care about Nevadans. They're going to be the ones that are left when all the people right now who become out there millionaires, they seem to be motivated by a different
See,
thing.
that's so true. I mean, they make $100K a year, and this is probably hyperbolic, but it's like, what if they can't support themselves when they're trying to fix Nevada?
Right.
And that's like where I'm trying to play devil's advocate here, where it's like, what if they can't even prosper enough to be able to help, I guess. But
For sure.
it's hard to get that balance,
It
It's
is.
a
Yeah,
hard
it's
paradox.
definitely hard to do that balance. But essentially, once you are elected, the government
Mhm.
already pays for so much of the senator's
Right,
expenses,
yeah.
costs.
Mhm.
They can also write off so many things that are legal. As a politician, that I think I'm gonna just say it without knowing that they'll be all right if they if they get in office. If they
Well,
get in
and
office,
in
yeah.
theory, you make everything better. You make, everything's better for you as well. In theory, right?
In theory, yeah. And if the
Theory.
state's doing really well from great decisions you made, that's going to have really great benefits either way. Even when you leave
Mhm.
office, I bet you'll have job offers from CEO executive boards. That often is what happens, and
Yeah.
that's a fair play in American politics. I understand that.
Yeah,
If
that's
you are making results, if you're doing
that's like
great.
a healthy use of free market and like
Yeah, I agree
competence hierarchies. I think that is a good use of that. Yeah,
for sure,
absolutely.
totally.
So here's another thing that might hinder someone who has that George Washington mindset when it comes to politics is that both the New York Post and Newsweek reported that the DNC, Democrats, spent $53 million on GOP candidates who they thought they could beat in the primaries.
Right, exactly.
So
Dirty.
when it's
That's
in the
dirty.
primaries, when it's Republicans versus Republicans, they are backing the
Wow.
politician who they thought they could beat in those primaries. And it's like, it just gets, and I'm sure the Republicans have done it too, but it was a
Mhm.
really big, I remember Tim Pool talking about it first, that Democrats were really pumping money into certain Republican candidates, so then their Democratic person could beat them.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
And
That
it's
makes
like, dude, when that stuff is going on, it's like, how does the good guy even get elected? It's like they don't.
I've wondered that for years,
It's
for
so
decades,
fucking
my whole
impossible
life.
because
I'm like, yeah,
you're going against whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. Because even if you're Bernie Sanders, the DNC and Hillary said, no, you're not getting there.
yeah, right,
Sorry.
yeah, like, yeah,
You know, even right now with RFK Jr., the DNC is saying, no, we're not even gonna we're not even gonna talk to you.
Yeah,
and
I
he's
heard
like
that.
supposed to be on
He's
their
getting
side.
blocked, isn't he?
Yeah,
Dude, he
yeah.
is. They're not even doing any debates. He's not even been awarded Secret Service, with all presidential candidates get a Secret Service appointments, and
Which his family of all families should probably have Secret
his
Service.
family of all
I'm
families,
just saying,
yes.
I don't know. I'm just
Yeah, thanks CIA. But
saying. It's get put on a list now.
yes. So
For sure.
I guess my point is when both those parties are just so powerful,
Mm-hmm.
because we've allowed this conglomerate of big government to get so
Yeah.
big. And people don't
Absolutely.
realize they're big because we've been programmed our whole lives to think it's normal.
Well, it has its benefits, and that
Tell
we
me
get-
too.
Well, I mean, we just become satiated and so comfortable with the security that it's always the freedom versus security, conundrum kind of thing.
Yeah, and wasn't it Benjamin Franklin said those who strive for security over freedom deserve neither?
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Exactly. So it's one of that things where we're becoming too complacent with the security and too comfortable with it.
And so then I would say that it's not a benefit, because complacency in society is not healthy.
No, I agree. Yeah, I guess it's not a benefit, but it's
Yeah, I think it's one of those that we can be smart and learn from others who have done well, and then they can learn from us. And why such long terms of running for office? So, like when they run for office, it's now become like 2 years you govern and 2 years you're running for the next term. This should be literally, and these are where the rules could really starve the beast, so to speak. A few heavy-handed rules, and again, these rules would be fierce enough that probably every single senator would vote against it, because they'd all gain to lose the current beast that feeds them.
They are the beast. Yeah, right. Yeah.
100%. But there's a few that would be just really, really powerful. And one would be limit the time you can campaign, which Europe often already does. They literally limit how long they can. First, that will cut down the amount of money. The other one is that corporations and political action committees should not. They changed it in 2001, something like that, 2003, where then they can contribute like they're an individual. So huge amounts of money can pour in, and they're just saying like, oh, it's fine. We're a neutral party. Like we're an individual who's paying. Like say you want to support somebody. You can put $20 in their fund or whatever, that kind of thing, they saw that with Obama, all the recent terms. You can literally contribute just individually. You take your $50 or whatever and bam, put it towards it. Well, corporations can do that as if they were just an individual. However, the corporations put hundreds of thousands and often millions into that. So why? And the only gain is that the corporations can game the system as they need now. And now it gives the examples like the DNC the type of ammunition to completely bury their opponent for no gain.
Yeah,
no one wins in that.
Direct lobbyism through money.
Those kind of things where if you starve the beast, then a lot of these people who really gain from this current setup would be like, I'll go find some other thing to do. And, they would have little incentive, I guess, to be more accurate, to continue the current arrangement where right now, they spend half their time in their office campaigning, and then they're raising money, and then it's corporations and individuals are not equal in terms of money they can contribute. So they should be declared as separate entities. And frankly, businesses should be greatly limited, and individuals should be greatly limited on how much they can contribute. We don't need, you look at the ads they're just starting to run on Fox News and, stuff like that, Betty watches. Do they really need that many ads?
That's my question is like, where is all this ad money going, and why is it so imperative to, it's like you're I mean, I get it. You have to get out there, but it's like we're in the age of the internet where you just post a video and access of millions of people. It's like, I don't understand that logic. It's just money. It seems like you're just funneling money into a money laundering scheme, but it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, and of course, there's always those things of how much of that money could be redistributed in other better uses,
Right.
and it's
Yes.
just being like hugely wasteful churn, so that everybody can like get
It's like a
appointed to the DNC, and like they get to be a vice president, and they get this $200,000 salary, and it's all coming from donations and political action committees.
bread and circus, fucking bread. And, yeah.
No one's actually doing anything. They're just literally running for office. It's just like you got this big old salary, and you got all this huge money funneling into your committee.
So,
Why? Absolutely.
So in that same line, that Warren Buffett quote you guys I think sent me, that he was saying you just passed a law that says anytime there's a deficit of more than 3% of GDP,
oh yeah,
all sitting members of Congress are ineligible for election. So do you guys think that would actually be
It's one of those real common sense rules where it would sting too bad every senator would vote against it, but it just makes too much sense.
Dude, I mean, it's like those are those tough love kind of rules that we gotta like implement, but it's still never happened.
We gotta implement something like that.
Because
I'm just jumping in because I had to go pee. I missed how you got onto the Warren Buffett quote.
Yeah.
But we were talking about that in an email thread. I don't know if that's what you're referencing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The fact that there are people out there who just think that the debt of 32 trillion is not a problem blows my mind. And when it's 130%, 130% of your GDP, that's where things get crazy. Dude. So when Warren Buffett says things like that, I'm all for that. I would vote for whoever voted for that. I would vote for that. That's my number one issue with politics is freedom and our financial well-being as a country and the future of it.
For sure. Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's too reasonable. It's just too reasonable to currently make it in the current system. So how would you change it? You do have to make these kind of difficult decisions, and Europe's one that seems to have good success with that. Limit the amount of time they can campaign. Therefore, in effect, you're reducing the amount of money that can pour into it. You can only do so much in a 3-month or 6-month campaigning window. It's now spiraled into like half these guys' terms. I mean, they're literally they're raising money for like half of their. Shouldn't you be governing? Isn't there enough to already be done on your docket list? That you would have any time to spend trying to raise money for another 2 years. It's insanity. So there should be real limits on that. And then you could make the hard limits of like the amount of time you can receive money to run. So then you don't need to go to every single one of these raise money things for 2 years before your next election as well. Instead, when you should have been making other things a priority.
Because you just make the maximum cap you can make, and then that's it, kind of thing. Like everybody just gets that. Yeah. To that point,
it does weigh against the aspect of the freedom to do anything that you want to do with your money, and that's what the original laws of the PACs and the corporations treat as individuals. Like we should be able to put as much as we want to a candidate. It's part of our right, but that doesn't help the system and doesn't help our democracy in any fundamental way. So I think being a patriot would be, do the right thing and not necessarily worry about the freedom to just give millions so that the DNC can then bury the opponents like they did with strategies in that case that Jesse was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and back to the GDP. I don't know. I'm sure, Alex, I'm assuming you understand how GDP works. Howard, I don't know if you know how GDP works, but for the general public, a quick example is if I make a widget and it cost me 80 cents to make this widget, and then I sell it to Alex for $100. And Alex, he makes a product that he takes that and assembles it into whatever he's making, and then he sells that thing for 130 because he buys it from me. He needs to make a profit, so he sells it to 130. And you, Ty, you consume that product. Just because there's $230, their GDP is $230 or whatever right here, doesn't mean that that's income, because I had $80 of expenses, he had $100 of expenses. So those expenses and that exchange of goods goes into GDP. So it doesn't just mean that there's all this money in cash flow to all of a sudden pay off our debt. Like there isn't that same correlation. GDP is not money that we make as a country. There's expenses and goods and costs, which is a huge part of it. Our consumption, the exchange of goods, and then you come and you buy an apple from someone else, like the exchange of dollars. So it's not as clear cut as, our GDP is $27 trillion. We can pay off $32 trillion easy. It's like, that's not how GDP works.
Not at all. That's not just free cash that can be allocated on a down payment. That's not how it works. Most of that money is immediately tied up in other obligations. Just as a really easy example is most small business owners, they have to take a lot of their money and reinvest it back into new inventory, new et cetera, et cetera. They can't just take that money and then pay off a credit card bill in one thing. They will have no future business for their business.
Yes.
That just simply is not how it works. You can't just take a huge amount of money that most of it's already tied up. Not all of it. In fact, you'll actually have an amount of it that can be allocated towards paying down debt and obligations, but a lot of it's already accounted for. And so that's a false equivalency. The other aspect of that is the rate at which your economy is growing and the rate at which your debt's growing. And no nation that's ever badly managed those has ever escaped that trap. So that's the alarming part, is the interest payments are growing. They're the fastest growing thing on our budget. So the interest payments to pay down that debt is the fastest part of our federal budget that's growing. So just to pay off so like when you go to pay a credit card, there's like they charge you amount for the interest that they're giving you a charge for loaning you the money, right? That interest payment is the fastest part of our federal budget, faster than Social Security, faster than Medicare. And any country that's tried to manage that badly has failed.
And it's not even making a payment on your principal, because like he's saying, it's only your interest. It's only not the actual debt.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Now, there is a few outliers to that. One is that a lot of that debt is not it's not like to China or anything. It is to other Americans and bonds that they've bought. But to wipe them out is essentially going to wipe our economy out. It doesn't really, it's an okay thing to say that, okay, we're not obligated 16 trillion to China, that if they called it tomorrow like a debtor, we would be totally screwed. It's not really like that either, but it also great. So we destroyed all the wealth of these Americans. So great. That doesn't help at all, because all their money that they'd have otherwise available to spend, they don't have available to spend anymore. So the economy would fall off a cliff. So that's you can't make such wide sweeping generalizations. I think you should always be very concerned about the debt that a government has. If history is any guide, that should always be something to be highlighted.
At what point does it become so much that it like phase changes and then it destroys itself? Or what other consequences?
It gets out of control fast. They think they have it under control, and the growth rates change of the economy, but the debt rate keeps climbing. Things like that. Pretty soon it's all upside down. That you're really not looking good. You're in a real pickle. And you have to make some really hard choices, like cutting Social Security or something that would absolutely infuriate like a huge amount of the country immediately. And then so you got a whole bunch of then you're paying for extra police costs and protecting, so these things get out of control really fast. I was reading about the Ottoman Empire and its struggles with inflation and debt. And there's no country that just, if they don't take it super serious, it might be a long time, because America has such great strategic advantages. But to say that we're exceptional has never worked for any country. I mean, the Ottomans thought they were too. So
the Roman Empire fell because of hyperinflation.
Romans absolutely thought they were exceptional.
Other than America, the greatest empire that we are aware of. Correct me, Alex, if you think there was a greater empire than the Roman Empire. But
it's a great
hyperinflation. Hyperinflation, man. They were taking gold coins and they were tapping them with copper.
Right.
And then there was just too many gold coins on the market. So we have $32 trillion in debt. So much of it's digital now, but we export our debt. So when with the Romans is they noticed that people had an abundance of currency, an abundance of currency. And the free market in a time where you didn't have social media realized that there was an abundance of currency, that there was hyperinflation going on. And in the United States, we export ours to other countries because countries like Africa, Asia, they wanted US dollars. Even South America, they wanted US dollars because to them it was a safe haven. The second no one wants those dollars, and like how I said in that email, chickens come home to roost, those come here. Dude, the second other countries really don't want our dollars, not just talking about doing BRICS and whatnot, BRIC nations, when it really doesn't, when that really happens, we're fucked.
Is it a domino effect where it just keeps getting out of control?
Yeah.
With that said, that's what's so phenomenal about the financial systems and how this whole thing works is largely we're floating and coasting along because despite how badly we're managing it, a lot of countries are actually managing it far worse. And so their currencies are even worse, even less, and their whole financial debt system is even in worse shape. So, but there's ones that are getting their shit together, and if they do enough, then it will change that dynamic. So to think that we're just all good, we can just keep coasting, that's a dangerous, dangerous game to play. I'll tell you that. Historically.
Yes. So Alex is correct that other countries, Japan, China, all of Europe, they're all a mess too. So here's a theory that I've had is this: if the heads of all these world banks, because the people at the very top are not dumb. Okay, they're not dumb.
Right.
If they all just indebt themselves so much, then everyone's just gonna call it even, and no one actually ends up with hurt feelings because everybody's in debt at the same level in a sense. That it's like, okay, we'll just all just like knock some digits to just make it simple, and we'll just go back to this big zero.
Right. That is a good point too, is that when we talk about the debts to foreign countries, we also need to bring up the fact that the debts they owe us. So if everybody called in their debts at once, we'd all be screwed. So there's a kind of a sense that we all own a bunch of debt to each other, but we'll just kind of pay it off slowly over time and pretend that we'll someday pay it off. We'll probably not historically, but we'll pretend that we'll pay it off. But if everyone so fully called it in like hardcore, everyone would be, Europe owes us a bunch. China owes us a ton. So, et cetera, et cetera. So, and we owe them. So, it's a complicated mess, really. But, yeah.
It would be that scene in the cowboy movie where there's 8 guys in a circle and everyone's pointing a gun at the guy to the right.
Exactly. No one's winning. Everyone's losing. It's exactly that kind of scenario with everyone calling their debts. So everyone kind of just coats along on. But if the debts continue to grow, at some point it's going to be, even the interest payments are going to be unmanageable. And we're already, now it may take another century before it becomes unbearable for our GDP to even bear the interest anymore. But why would we even go that direction when we can play that game? Yeah. When we can't, we don't have to. That's crazy.
I mean, 2 things. One, Chamath Palihapitiya, his prediction is that GDP to the debt to GDP ratio hits 200% before our government actually makes any fiscal changes, monetary changes.
Right.
And number 2, the thing that worries me that's kind of on the opposite spectrum of everyone has the same amount of debt, so they're all just going to call it a wash, is that there are countries out there like China who has been importing tons, and as in tons, 2,000 pounds plus of gold.
And mining.
They aren't exporting any precious metals. Russia, of all countries, has been buying large amounts of gold. Their gold reserves are the highest they've ever been.
Right.
And it's like, people could say like, well, gold's going to go away because of Bitcoin or this. But at the end of the day, since the beginning of recorded history, gold has been money. And countries are going to find it valuable. There are reasons why we use it. And countries like China and even Russia, they're not dumb. They're importing it for a reason because they see something happening. Now, China does a lot of money printing. They do a lot of expansion of their currency supply on purpose for trade purposes with us.
And you got to
Which
remember, we do that manipulation as well. So we manipulate our currency to have export controls, because essentially cheaper, cheaper money it's cheaper to export. So that's why China actually actively buys our bonds to lower the value of their currency. Their currency could actually rise and be more equal to ours, but they actually artificially depress it. So then that way it's actually cheaper for us to buy their exports and for them to export to the world. So they actually gain a strategic advantage by doing that. Every country plays that game to a different degree. We've pretty much given up on that. We want to have the foreign reserve currency instead. And in return, we've accepted that we don't have a good value currency, like China's. But there's also, I just want to jump back just for a second, is the gold aspect is towards the end of the Roman Empire, a fascinating thing happened, that they had so devalued their currency, the precious metals in it, that the Roman legions literally would not take payment in money anymore. So by the end of the Roman Empire, it had literally reverted to the original form of trade, which is, I'm going to actually give you wheat. I'm actually going to give you flour. I'm actually going to give you actual trade goods in place of money. So you would trade goods instead of actually use money to say, money is basically a credit to say, I'm going to buy something later instead of trade you right now for your things. And so there's like layers of it. There's the money that we have right now. If that fails, then there's gold and precious metals. And then if that fails, it literally reverts back to the primal original trade, which is literally trade goods. In that environment, nobody trusts anybody. Money even trading of precious metals requires a degree of trust with the other party.
So can you guys explain what happened and why we came off the gold standard? What was the logic behind that? And
it is similar in a way to the same issue as with China manipulating its currency. We limited the security of the gold, but in return, you have a larger total amount of money. So there's more. So if you're in a consumer society where 70% is consumer, then you have more total money out there that you can put out that doesn't have to be anchored to a certain amount of gold in a bank somewhere. In this case, it would be
that's the benefit of taking it off the gold standard.
But again, there's downsides and upsides to both of that, and essentially everyone was saying, we trust your dollar enough, which is all the more why we should be responsible with our government debt, is we trust your dollar enough that we're going to not anchor it to gold anymore. In return, we have more out there at any given time. So consumers, in theory, have much more to trade back and forth with each other. And in general, that's work. But will it work forever is, I think, a more important question. And that might not. It might not, actually.
So you got to think of it as drinking alcohol. It gives you a short-term boost, getting off that gold standard because they were able to put more money into the market. But then you're going to have a long-term headache later down the road. You're going to have a headache.
That could very well be the case. Yes.
And when we got off the gold standard, the French president said that the United States government is no longer trustworthy, and every country in the world should get their gold back because we were holding a lot of people's gold. They said that we should get our gold back because they're getting off the reserve currency, and they are going to be able to print money into infinity, and therefore we should not trust them. Their president said that right after we got off the gold standard.
And here we are.
It's a pretty gnarly speech where he was calling us out.
That's why it's so important that the U.S. always pays its bills. That's why I was going on about the default, because the exact examples of if we're going to trust the money instead of the gold is that you do need to pay your payments. It's like your credit card payments. You can't afford to default if your money is no longer backed by a precious metal. And that's the kind of the hooliganism that they literally push it to the very last day to the default. And that's why I sent that article where one of the big credit agencies literally degraded United States government credit recently. And they did it simply on the fact that you guys took till the very last day to prevent a default. This kind of shenanigans, when you guys are the foreign reserve currency, is unacceptable. And that's why I was going on about it, because it was like, this is crazy. They're literally playing chicken, and they're no longer tied to gold. So there's no security there. It's the value that we're always going to pay our bills. Right now, our currency is based on that we're always going to pay our bills. Always. And we have,
Do you
though.
think there was?
To be fair, though, we have.
Yeah,
For like
we've been
190 years or something,
been
the
good
U.S.
so
has always
far,
paid its bills.
but
So
it's getting worse and worse and scarier and scarier
it's
each
getting harder
time.
to
Yeah,
manage. And like
yeah,
Jesse was saying, it's essentially like, what if that headache grows stronger and stronger over time, and that was the end result of it? Instead of well managing it, we got a nice little boost temporarily, but in return cost us dearly down the road.
So
But if we did manage it well, then you have more plentifulness in general, is the theory.
right.
So if you did manage
What
it well.
how could we have gone into like the 21st century with the gold standard? Would you just have to have produce so much gold to cover the amount of like money and you'd
That's
need
the
for that
reason why they went
market?
off the first place. The amounts that we're talking in terms of trillions of dollars,
Right.
you can't, there's
It
not
wouldn't
enough
have
Inconceivable.
gold on
happened.
Earth.
Right.
There's just not
Yeah.
enough gold on Earth. Like, I think
Right.
all the gold that's been mined would fit into an Olympic-sized swimming pool. So it's literally like, at some point you had to either come off of that anchor and then you have more, or you are tied to that anchor and there's only that much available in terms of total cash
Damn.
equivalents.
What a conundrum.
So
Interesting.
here's the thing. If we didn't go off the gold standard, and here's a solid theory, because we did go off the gold standard, so we don't know for a fact. The cost of our living would be lower. Our purchasing power would be far greater. So houses, cars, food, healthcare wouldn't be as expensive it is now because we had an expansion of currency supply. But we wouldn't have been able to put money into the market to grow our economy from 1971 to where we are today as quickly as we have.
Right.
That's a fair
Now
assessment.
we would still probably be by far the most dominant country in the world,
For other
but we wouldn't
strategic
have been able to do this hockey stick of growth. It would have been more of like that linear, that kind of just,
which might have been good long term.
it's
much
way
more
better
like
long
Europe.
term.
Yeah.
Right.
But
yeah.
if you're a politician, you literally make promises to the people at the expense of the treasury.
Right.
That's
Especially
what
if
you
you're
do.
in there for life, and you could
Especially if you're in there for life. Every president, if you just look at history, and I hope some guy with a lot of time on his hands makes a video about like every president since 1900 and the things that they did in place to make them and their economy look better than it actually was. So like Nixon, we got off the gold standard. He flooded the market with money. So then we get this boost. Lyndon B. Johnson, he changed how we calculated unemployment. So the fucking economy looked great. We were at war with Vietnam. He was like, we got to make something look good. We changed unemployment calculations. Boom, things look good. Biden, he gave everybody a bunch of fucking just money and checks in the mail. Like if you had a kid, you got like an extra $200 a month or whatever that bullshit was, $600, and all that went into expenses. And it was propping up our economy. Republicans, Democrats, they all did things like this over time.
For sure.
To just make it look good on their watch.
And it would be one thing if you had a budget surplus and you're doing this, but if you're fueling it with debt, you're literally undermining the future guarantees that you're going to be able to pay your bills.
Exactly.
And that is the inherent danger of what we're messing with, essentially.
Patriot, yeah.
Like that example I gave last week about Sweden and how they had such a surplus of cash in the late 1800s.
If you have it.
They funded all these social programs. That's what Rome did too. They had a surplus of cash, and they're like, let's do all these social programs, and then it spreads like wildfire.
For sure. They were literally doing bread circuits, just like giving out free bread. They'd have these huge, manufacturer amount of breads and just give it out to people free, just similar to these programs, in that sense. It's still, somebody's got to still pay for that. And it's great if you have a surplus, but it isn't if you're actually fueling it with debt. And that's the danger we're literally facing right now. It's like if you're using your credit card to pay for regular expenses, you're in debt. You got a problem. You got a serious problem.
And here's another thing for people to realize how hard it is to pay for our debts. If you took, and Tony Robbins back in like 2008, 2009, put out a great video that anyone can go find on YouTube, Tony Robbins like debt. And essentially it shows that you could take all the money from every US citizen and it only gets you through like 13 days of the United States budget. You could take all the money from every Super Bowl in history, and it gets you like another 26 days. You take every sport, NASCAR, baseball, NBA, all the money that they generate every year. He even goes back in time. He goes, let's go back in time, and every year. And it gets you through like 2 months. All the money that Apple, Microsoft, he strips them of all their money, and it gets you like a couple more months. And his whole point is, when people say other people aren't paying their fair share, you can rape everybody in the country of their income or expendable money, all the profits of the Super Bowl, athletes, everybody, and it doesn't pay for a single year's budget.
Right. That's where the thing of you guys having that conversation was interesting, in the sense that you can't really justify the government expenses at this point. And I think it comes around exactly to what we're saying. It needs to become, and it should be a priority, to be leaned out, to be shrunk down in size. It's one thing if you have a surplus, but these government costs simply are not sustainable. And it doesn't matter which party. That shouldn't be the main focus. It should be the main focus that this thing is currently unsustainable. It's too top heavy. It's draining too much money away, especially for the results it's giving. But that's a whole separate thing. I'm not even saying that. We can't afford it. It doesn't even matter the results it's giving. We'll just set that. We'll set that aside. It's just simply too top heavy, and that means hard questions are going to have to be, raised about how to shrink it. And a lot of people are going to be happy, but
going to have to happen at one point, or else
either they are now or they are later.
Yeah.
And they're much more unhappy later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I look at Venezuela and stuff. I was watching this guy. There's a channel where Kurt, have you guys watched that guy where he like travels around the world? And so he's going to Venezuela and stuff, and they have mismanaged their government expenses so much worse that everyone craved the foreign currency of the dollar. And you see that in a lot of countries. That still is the case, because despite our issues, we still pay our bills enough to where people would rather have that than have the dollars of the local currency. But to assume that that's always going to be the case is how insanely arrogant. And, it's such a risky game. You're literally playing with fire right there. And if you do get burnt and China does get its act together, I would say China might not be the cure for that, because obviously, I'm sure you guys have seen their debt is ballooning. Their federal debt is, they're doing what we did for the last 20 years. So they're on the same path that we are, where they're just huge expenditures of federal government. But, what if some countries finally do get together, form a BRIC-like type of thing that actually do pay their bills and do manage their budgets well? Then the dollar's value will instantly be less valued. Those countries like Venezuela will want to go for those dollars instead of ours. And that will be a major problem for us to service our debt. Because right now, if everybody wants our dollars, then we can make a lot of demands on getting those dollars, such as the rate at which we loan them to other people. So we get good interest rates. We get good interest rates on our government debt. All these things would change if our money was no longer as highly valued. So it's a super risky game that we're playing. And so the idea that everyone's just like each administration's just like expanding more federal spending. Doesn't matter which party's in office. They're both just like, let's do the whole new give check program and do like a double check program. You're paying with debt. You don't have a surplus, guys. None of you guys have surplus. So it's so reckless in the bigger scheme thing.
Yeah, none of them, not one of the two parties, have led by example on that they can fiscally do it.
Yeah.
Because the thing, and I think I've said this long time ago in the past, the Republicans, they're just fucking liars. They pretend that they're fiscally conservative.
Right.
But you're fucking liars, Republicans. The Democrats, they're at least open and honest. We're just going to fucking spend everything.
They don't even pretend about it.
Kids' money. Kids' money. We want it all.
We'll expand programs on programs on programs. Yeah, they don't even pretend, but neither one of them are acting with any fiscal discipline at all.
And then you get them in the room together, and it's almost even worse. Like, I enjoy when they're like in these weird stalemates and they like aren't passing anything, and I'm like, thank God they're not passing shit.
At least they're not going to expand another huge program that they can't afford at the very least. It comes back to what we were saying for a couple chats now, is literally this shit can't continue. They have to shrink the size of the government. They have to shrink the expenses of it. And there's really no way around that. The sooner we set the 5 alarm fire going, the sooner we accept that, and the sooner we start tackling programs that are sucking huge amounts of money away and actually shrinking them down and finding new alternatives to them, the more as it'll help. Like it's like, why waste time arguing about the size of it? It needs to be fixed. We all agree it's out of control, and so therefore, start going after it. But that doesn't seem to be a priority.
What are each of your number one and number two priorities for the next the person you want to vote for? What are your number one and number two? Not the person, but those topics, whether it's fiscally responsive, abortion, gun laws, education, any of that stuff. What is your number one and number two?
Damn.
For sure. Yeah, I think you guys go first.
I'll go. Mine is fucking freedom. So anyone who did any lockdowns, so Trump, he went along with that. So sorry, Republicans. And then mine is the fucking fiscal responsibility of our country. That is 1 and 2. Freedom and our monetary system.
Yeah, I'd say mine are more broad and vague, like honesty and like transparency. But it's like those aren't really implementable on like, tangible ways.
Well, something like that, it just needs to be demonstrated. Like, it would just be nice for them to demonstrate. I will vote for somebody who demonstrates those qualities time and time again. Right. You got an offer from, like, unlike Chuck Schumer, who had to report that from United Group. You decided, I'm not going to take the money from United Group. And you know what? You could tell all your campaign, make it into an ad. By all means, go ahead. But as long as it shows that on the legal documents you didn't take the money, then great. We need to start seeing more of that. They have to choose for themselves instead of us make another law to force their hand. They need to do it on their own for once.
That's like integrity, I think is the word, to do something, do the right thing while no one is looking, something like that. Kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So what's a political policy?
I know. I was going to say, those aren't political policies. Those are like vague ideals. But
you think of yours, Alex. Jump in this.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the more we go on about it, it brings it back to the beginning in terms of not climate change, but in energy policy. We need, like we were saying, I think in the last chat or the one previous, is how much energy is intertwined with economics. So the two are highly intertwined. And so therefore, we need to get some serious fire going in terms of that. If you need to reduce regulation, it might even be something super mundane. Like, it's not some big sweeping thing. It's like literally reduce the red tape so more nuclear power plants can get built. Something like that. It's not some big political you're attacking the other side about. It's like literally like bureaucrats in a local office need to stop doing so much red tape so we can get these things built. Same with housing. I think another is in that same vein is we need to get more housing and reduce the amount of red tape and bureaucracy that's limiting that. And also, we need to figure out a way to fairly attack the NIMBY situation, because that's part of the problem as well. So those kind of things, and ones who are willing to engage in that. Right now, that's such a hot button issue, no politician would even touch it. To see them to have the integrity and the bravery and say, guys, I know you want to keep the values of their neighborhoods nice, but none of it's going to be worth much with an aging population, and you guys aren't building enough housing. You need to be fair about it, because it's going to cause a crisis of epic proportions if the values drop hugely when there isn't anybody who has enough money to pay for your insanely overpriced houses. And so, they need to be fair about what the actual value of housing is. And right now, I don't believe they are. And you can do that by basically reducing supply. It's always a matter of supply and demand in all economics. Right now, essentially, housing's so out of control because of reducing the supply side. I even looked that up recently before our chat. U.S. housing hit a peak in 2006, and it's since dropped by 75% in terms of U.S. new construction and hasn't ever recovered since 2006. Even though all the millennials are hitting their peak house buying ages, they're all having children, they're all exactly at the point in their lives, unlike the boomers who had much higher rates of house expansion in that same period of their life. We aren't getting that. We've had a 75% drop since 2006, which has never recovered. I get it's not going to just bounce from 2008, the lush days of that, but a 75% drop that hasn't recovered. You're literally starving it on the supply side, and now we have houses approaching 450,000 on average across the United States. And as we said, with the median pay, that would equal 14 years if you saved every dollar. Let's double that, and that would say more like 28 years before you'll save enough to ever get a house.
Yeah, that's
So
insane.
yeah, those kind of things. But energy policy, if you took 1% and made it 3% and plowed huge amounts into infrastructure, and not just new power plants, but more efficient power lines, better roads that service all these infrastructure. Fiber optics would be huge, really expanding the fiber optics. So a lot of people have a lot more fast internet. You got more app development, more people that can use apps, more money that you can sell from apps. There's a lot that's being like starved in terms of that. And the United States has always been famous about being one of the biggest spenders in infrastructure and one of the first to try it out. And usually it's paid off pretty well. The fact that we're so timid about it is the fact that we're already so in debt. No one's even proposing that we raise it to 3%.
Dude, but we'll pay some $200 billion a month to Ukraine.
Yeah, or that. Yeah.
The
And
fuck?
that part is, I mean, in terms of the military budget, that's not a priority for me. It might be for you guys, but for me, it's not. In terms of the total amount of spending, Medicare and Medicaid totally dwarf it to such a scale that it's like not even. It's like really not even a thing, you know. I mean, but
You
I think
are
we should
correct,
separate
Alex.
the Ukraine thing because that's a whole other really
No,
good.
you are correct. But all the expenses for Ukraine, they don't actually even calculate to the military budget. If you look into how they're calculating it, they're going to add it at the end of the year somewhere into our budget. It's not
And
even
it
allocated.
might be in that little graph that said other, you know, so it had
Yes,
like
other.
but yeah, I mean, the third largest expense in our federal government is the military
Mhm.
expenses.
No, but I'm with
Yeah,
you.
that's a whole
Cutting
other
those other
discussion
ones
because,
first,
like,
yeah.
I believe we need a strong and powerful military and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
The world is unfortunately the way it is. I didn't make the world, but history would say, what's the famous quote? If you want peace, then prepare for war. And I've never really seen any realistic counter to that logic. It is unfortunately the way of the world. Maybe someday we'll stop trying to take each other's stuff, but we're not there yet. Even just recently as the current thing in Ukraine. And that's not the only one. There's ones all over Africa, within African countries, within Ethiopia. There's already been multiple conflicts. So that shit would spiral completely out of control, way more than it is right now. Than if we didn't have the stability
Yeah.
of the military saying, if you get too crazy, there's somebody who's going to bring some order to the region if you need. So I didn't make the world, but that's how it is. That's my approach to it. But yeah, I think energy policy and also as much as possible using moral integrity and what they decide to do by trying to heal some of the rift within the country. We've had a good period of really opening wounds, and we need a period of kind of coming together a little bit. And then, well, as we do as Americans, we're going to maybe another decade down the road or something, reopen some new wounds again. So it should be a time. It's not helpful to have it too ripped open and too raw.
Ty, come on, give us a couple policies.
No, I just piggyback on what you guys are saying, where it's, I think, just being financially and efficient and, more efficient on the energy side all around. I think that's our biggest problem, is that we're just so bloated and so, complacent. And so.
Well, I'm going to throw in a feather ruffler in there because I'm going to go with my freedom. I don't know if that's an actual policy.
Yeah,
but
sure, that's
yeah, that is our monetary policy. So monetary policy 1, I'm gonna go with abortion 2 and energy 3.
Ooh, yes, that's a
Energy.
feather ruffler. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not too hard position on that, but the comments might be.
Yeah, the comments might. The energy thing, because I believe it could bring the quality of living up, cost of living down in America, and you want that for your citizens. I mean, in the past, even in the state that we live in, on them talking about X percentage of all energy in our state has to be quote unquote green or renewable by fucking, even in a couple of years, it's like that affects the poor people in your country when it's mandated that this is where we get our energy from. But we need to improve the energy sector.
The carrot and the stick. The carrot and the stick, yeah.
But we
set those
need to
demands,
improve the energy.
But also, if those demands aren't met, then there should be certain penalties, because they should be outlining more infrastructure costs for that than they are. So it's like, you're not doing that enough, but then you're also blaming that it's why there's not enough. It's like it's a two-way thing. But for sure, I think both is absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, the person I feel has honesty and integrity, if I had to pick one, I would go with RFK, because he literally is like, the CIA fucking killed my uncle.
Right.
Yeah. And he's someone who's grown up in the establishment his entire life. He knows nothing but being at the highest level of society, in a sense. He is a Kennedy. And the amount that he talks about how corrupt our federal government is freaking mind-blowing. I'm surprised he hasn't been suicided already.
Yeah, if what he says is true, I mean, there's such deep, corruption within this country that it's going to be really hard to bounce back. So it's like,
if what he says is 75% true.
I know.
And I'm not talking, because I know, Alex, one of the things that triggers you about him is his stance on vaccines, which you got to actually listen to his whole explain. Outside of that, just the government stuff is like, it's what you hear people say, and you're like, yeah, you're a little crazy.
Like,
but then when he is saying it, and just the connections he has, and again, his dad and his uncle. I mean, his dad was, when he was running for president, he was beating the in-house Democrat. We already had a Democrat who was president, and then his dad decided to run against a Democrat already.
Yeah, there was an interesting book.
And then he got fucking whacked.
There was an interesting book some years back, and it was in regards to the mafia working with the CIA during the Cold War. And part of it was the insinuation that the mafia had killed JFK, and using the CIA's help.
Wow.
There was never any proven to that, but there was that for sure that the mafia was actually used by the CIA, and the mafia used the CIA for favors to hinder the Soviet Union. Totally unacceptable. When I realized that, I was super disappointed that they would even work with people like that in terms of that kind of thing. And it does show you that that stuff does happen if they feel that they're so under threat from the Soviet Union that now they're going to compromise any kind of moral integrity and start working with criminals generally pretty bad people who I don't agree with how they do things. And so, but yeah, they were totally working with them in the Soviet Union, because they justified it like the Soviet Union was such a threat. I'm not sure. They might have. Maybe the CIA, maybe the mafia did kill him with the help of assassinate him with the help of the CIA. But honestly, I don't know that part. I can't say either way. But that's what the book was about. But either way, these are the kind of things that would spiral out. Imagine if that was you're the son of that guy, and some of these details start leaking out.
We could do a whole podcast on this topic alone, I think.
That's true, for sure, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because I got to get going here soon, so let's maybe save that for next week.
Yeah, so RFK's dad ran against Lyndon B. Johnson, and he was beating Lyndon B. Johnson in the polls.
Interesting, twist of fate, like how things have turned out.
It's it's really it's really weird why he was, of all the presidents that they would try to assassinate, it is weird that he would be assassinated. So you do have to wonder what the motivations behind those people were. So I mean, I'm open to that being a possibility for sure. I think, like I said earlier in the podcast, though, for me it's a real tough sell, because he's the son of another dynasty. And I mean, that's like, I
I can
really
see
need
that.
to see
Yeah.
him be above and beyond incredible to even
Yeah. No, I see
consider
that.
when
I
we
see that
start
side.
going down that road. For example, there was just a coup in Gabon, an African country, West African country near Nigeria. And it was like, okay, so the military overthrew the president. He was democratically elected. At first, you're like, what a complete outrage. That seems so weird. That's not right. Except that you realize that one family was reelected to office for like decades. So this same family that they overthrew was just reelected, their son and their grandson, and then now the father. It's like they just reelected before that the father. So they just reelected the same family. In my mind, that's not really a democracy, and that's not a healthy functioning democracy, anyways. So a lot of countries do that. Why would we ever even want to play with that? Give someone completely separate from any dynastic political family a shot at governing before we start looking at political dynasty families. So just on that principle alone, I know his views are interesting and they're definitely refreshing to see from a Democratic candidate. But in terms of that's a hard sell immediately for me. Super hard sell. I just think going down that road, you see so many countries where they just elect the son of another president. They don't even like. There's not even. Are we really going to go down that road? With we already did with Bush. I would like us to really try to steer away from that, despite what he
Well,
might have to contribute. And if he does have something to contribute, like find a real way to really make good change and then really prove himself because he needs to
let's
as a
get in.
political dynasty.
Yeah, I know. I totally agree. But let's get into this because I like this topic too because there's a couple things.
Yeah, we'll talk about JFK and Operation Northwoods.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff, but I totally agree that you're totally right that it's like we're just adding to the nepotism, but I agree. Yeah,
Dude, have you heard some of the stuff that Barack Obama his family was friends with the Bushes too? Look into that. It was just
Oh
like,
yeah, stuff like in 9/11, the Saudi royals here were totally protected and escorted off during the whole incident when it was happening.
yeah,
So things like that where they're just all buddy up top, and so those kind of things are not helpful. So yeah, we should definitely go in. We should actually expand that into the next one where we talk about our candidates we want going forward. And
let's do
who
it.
we think, who we think is going for each one. That's a great idea, actually.
sounds good.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening to episode 5. Tell all your friends.
Right on.